GLOBIS.
Good afternoon. So, I know I'm supposed to pretend to talk about sustainable innovation, but I don't actually know anything about that. In fact, I know we've been talking about a lot of facts and learning about all kinds of things all day long. And what I'm going to do today is take a different approach to the discussion around innovation. You know, we've been talking all day about different ways in which we should be innovating across many, many different fields. But the one thing in which we haven't really innovated on for a long time is the very act of innovating. And if you just think about it, the ideas we have around how we should be innovating have been around for, 20 years maybe was the last time we had an innovation on it. We have minor innovations on it, but we haven't really disrupted the model around innovation. And I actually think that's something we should all think about in a very serious way. What I'm going to do today is take a different approach to the talk around innovation. And instead of actually using the word innovation, we're talking very specifically about any one important domain of innovation. I'm going to instead tell you a personal story. And I'm going to tell you a personal story that I had in which I learned some very important lessons that I have been using towards how to innovate. So in the last few years, I've been developing a method and teaching a course on the act of innovation, but it really all was inspired by my own personal journey in thinking about innovation. And I thought today what I would do is share that journey with you. And on your seats, you will have an index card, and I will tell you when you're supposed to use it. So, you know, when you look at the Earth from the sky, it's brown, it's white, it's green, it's mostly blue. Blue marble is what we were told by the Apollo 17 in their photos in 1972. That's probably the most famous photos we have of what the Earth looks like from space. Of course, I don't actually know if I saw that. I think I did, but I was very young when I started to go blind, and so I have no recollection at this moment whether I actually saw those photos of the Earth from those beautiful color blue, or whether I somehow made it up by borrowing other people's descriptions and just imagining it to be that way. Of course, I know for sure that I never saw the most recent photo from space of what the Earth looks like, in which it's described to me as being a very brilliant, breathtaking, impossible blue. Well, even though I don't know that much about color, I do have a memory, a very powerful association with the color blue. I remember when I was a kid, and I would look up at the sky. So for me, I wouldn't look downwards at the Earth, but I would look up at the sky. And I remember seeing that sky as a very light, gauzy blue. It was vast. It felt so free. I somehow imagined myself freely flying in the sky in the midst of those clouds. Well, that was my first dream. I also remember when I was in second grade, my teacher, Ms. Horowitz, had asked us the proverbial question, what do you want to be when you grow up? She had just finished telling us how we could grow up and do and be whatever it is we wanted to be as long as we put our minds and hearts to it. So as a good child, I raised my hand and I said, well, when I grow up, I'm going to be a pilot. And I'm going to explore the planet and beyond. Well, you can just imagine all the other kids were snickering, and the teacher was rather speechless. That dream was not available to a girl going blind. And at that moment, I was both literally and figuratively grounded. Because I understood that that dream, which was available to the other kids, lots of big dreams were available to the other kids, I wasn't going to be able to have. You know, when I was growing up, I was dogged by many, many questions. Well, let's call them problems. People kept telling me about my problems, but they always came in the form of questions. Is she going to be able to read? Is she going to be able to write? Is she going to be able to do science or math? And the teacher kept asking these questions. And no matter where I went and who I was talking to, they kept asking me all these questions. How is she going to get around? Is she going to be able to have friends? Is she going to get married? Will she have a family? They wondered. I wondered. You know, when I was confronted by these problems, limitations, whether they be real or imagined, it was difficult. But it also taught me something very important, because it taught me about the gap between our dreams and reality. They're actually two sides of the same coin. In order to achieve your dreams, you have to identify and overcome your reality. You cannot have one without the other. Now, I often feel that we struggle to think about our dreams and reality at the same time. We don't want to do that. You know, we try to be practical and only think about reality, or we think about our dreams and we love obsessing about our dreams, talking about our dreams to ourselves and analyzing whether that dream is possible or not possible. But we hold on to these dreams close to our heart, almost like birthday wishes. We hold on to them close to our heart. Rarely do we want to voice them out loud because we're afraid that we might just run into Mrs. Horowitz, who might just calmly and clearly tell us that it's just not possible. Like the Japanese phrase, shagata ga nai. We're afraid to voice those dreams because we're afraid to experience that sense of loss, that sense of failure. I believe that this is a mistake. I think it is only when we are able to understand our dreams with an understanding of our reality that we're able to actually get closer to our dreams. Now, I was very lucky because people kept telling me about my problem and they kept reminding me of my problems. I could never run away. I could never hide them in the dark recesses of my brain or of my heart. So I had to confront it. Now, I wanted to be a pilot, and that dream was taken off the table. Now, I want you to now pick up that index card that's on your seat, and I want you to do a little exercise that I had to do, which I'd like you to do with me. I know that every single one of you in this room has a dream. You have some problem that you wish you could solve. Could be a very personal problem, could be a very big problem, but there is something that you dream of being the one to solve. I'm not going to ask you to share it, but I want you to be honest with yourself and jot down in 1 or 2 sentences what that dream is. What's that problem that you wish you could solve? You know, the very act of writing down that problem has increased the probability that you're going to solve it by about 42%. Okay? Simply writing it down, and if I urge you to describe it in more detail later on, just writing it down and seeing it in specific terms has a really big effect in really helping you better understand it. But hold on to that card. I'm going to have you do another thing with it. Now, as you look at your problem, you start immediately thinking about, how am I going to solve this problem? Is it really solvable or not? I mean, seriously, how am I going to solve this? Just think about all the limitations. Well, but before you think about whether there's a solution to the problem, I want to remind you of a basic limitation of all of us human beings. And that is that we get trapped by our perspective. It's so easy for us to get trapped in our perspective. As Einstein once said, if I had exactly 1 hour to save the planet, I would spend the first 59 minutes understanding the problem. I'd like to believe that what Einstein meant by that was that, well, look, you can always take a problem and reframe it in so many different ways. And so I really want to understand all that before I come up with what the solution might actually be. So here I am, this young blind kid, trying to figure out what am I going to be when I grow up. So I look around all the different cultures, and I try to figure out what are all the solutions or options available to people like me. I remember when I was in Spain, everywhere I went, random people would come up to me and slap money in my hands and expected me to give them lottery tickets in return. Apparently, the blind had cornered the lottery ticket market there and for a while in Spain. You know, when I came here to Japan in 1995, and I was at Kyoto Daigaku, I still have this vivid memory of people coming up to me, even in the subway, and taking my hands and putting them on their hands and shoulders and expected me to perform these magical massages. Apparently there was some very famous character here that did massages who was blind. When I was in school, the counselors assumed they didn't have to show me the college manual because I, like most blind people, would end up on government handouts. But the music teacher had faith in me. He said, well, she's blind, and handed me a clarinet. Alas, I wasn't meant to be the next Ray Charles or Stevie Wonder. Then when people realized that I actually might be able to go to college, then they decided that the most obvious choice for me, which just was obvious to everybody other than me, was just become a lawyer. They said, justice is blind. When I looked around these different cultures, I clearly observed many different options, and they were all reasonable options. And what I learned from this experience was that there was no right or wrong option. In fact, you could come up with infinite number of options, and I learned that different cultures framed it in different ways, and so they came up with different options. But the problem was I didn't like any of these options. And I didn't want any of these options. And as I began to examine why I didn't want these options, the first thing I realized was that these options, even though they were culturally different, they still posed a trap. They were still boxing me into thinking of myself in terms of what sighted people thought the blind could and couldn't do. And so I was still trapped. And what I realized that I had to do was stop thinking of myself as somebody who belonged into this category called blindness, and started thinking of myself instead as Sheena, an individual. And my real problem in life was not that I was going blind. My real problem was that of self-discovery, and blindness was just one facet of my journey. So, did I have to settle for these meager options put before me? No, I didn't have to settle for these meager options put before me, and too often I think when we see options, we think we have to settle for them because after all, we must settle for those because they're all reasonable. But I would urge us all in those moments when you don't like any of those reasonable options, that's the time when you go back to your dreams. And that's when you ask yourself, why did I really want that dream anyway? And why did I really want to be a pilot anyway? And maybe I needed to better understand what were the underlying desires of wanting to be a pilot. The German writer Goethe, he wrote this wonderful treatise on the nature, the function, and the psychology of color. And in there he wrote about the brilliance of blue. That blue is in many ways provides us a contradiction between excitement and repose. So you know, like the sky at a distance and mountains at a distance, they look blue. And yet a blue surface right next to you is rather retiring. Maybe that's why I wanted to be a pilot. Really what I wanted when I was looking at the sky when I was really young had nothing to do with wanting to be a pilot, but really what I wanted was a career for myself where I would have excitement and repose. You know, it's really important for all of us to figure out what it is that we're really intrinsically motivated by, because that's when we're going to be able to develop those core competencies and be our most creative selves. On your index card, I want you to do your next exercise for me. What I want you to do is now write down 3 reasons why you want to solve that problem. And when I say 3 reasons, I don't mean why you should solve that problem. Too often we talk about how we want to solve sustainability or the environment or save world hunger or a bazillion other things, which are all wonderfully noble causes. But I want to know why you want to solve it. Reframe it as an act of self-discovery. What is it in for you? Jot down those 3 reasons. It should feel intrinsically motivated. Okay, so I'm not gonna, you can finish it up later. So when we reframe the problem in the way I just said it, we tend to rebel against that because we want to make decisions in a much more rational way. But what I'm urging you to do is to not always think about it in a rational way. Because when rationality is failing you, it's because you have not accounted for your deepest desires, and you're going to have to do that. Now, in the process of coming up with your deepest desires, you discover lots of dreams. And one of the things you also discover is that most of those dreams that you come up with get taken off the table. And let me assure you, I had many, many dreams that were taken off the table. I wanted to be a brain surgeon. I wanted to be an archaeologist. I wanted to parade up and down the New York Stock Exchange and be one of these traders. I thought that would look really cool. And one by one, those dreams were taken off the table. But although we think that every time a dream is taken off a table, that means we failed. That means we lost something. And I would urge us to say that is not a moment of failure, but that's actually a moment to ask yourself, what is it about that dream that I'm actually willing to fight for? The great thing about us as human beings is our dreams do come in an endless supply pack. And because they come in an endless supply pack, we do have the ability to create ourselves and create the self we want to be. So what I'll do is I'll end on a quote from Bob Dylan, who said that life is not about finding yourself. It's not about finding anything. Life is about creating yourself. And what I want you to do is in life, figure out what is it that you are really willing to dream. What dreams are you willing to make into your reality? And that's how we create our most beautiful and singular selves. Thank you very much.